West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
From what we know right now, should the suspect in this case, Jack Teixeira, should have even had access to these documents? Did it make any sense to you when you heard that this young man had access to that kind of sensitive information?
Well, I don't think there's any question but that somebody who's a low-level air guardsman should not have had access to some of the highly classified information that was out there. There's no reason for it. He doesn't need it. And I think the fact that there are literally thousands upon thousands of people who have access to classified information is something that really has to be looked at very seriously in order to limit access and make sure that it is more secure.
And how much damage do you think has been done as a result of these documents being released and put out there? It's quite an embarrassment for the U.S. I mean, with allies all over the world. I'm sure they've been burning up the phone lines over to the White House trying to get to the bottom of this.
Well, the interesting thing that I'm seeing is that we really don't know the full extent of the damage that's been done. We get new revelations almost every day now involving just exactly what was in the leak of this classified information, which tells me that this stuff is spread all over the place. But make no mistake about it. Anytime there is a leak of highly classified information, it is going to damage our national security. And that's happened here. There are sources that are at risk. Those that provide that information are now vulnerable. It impacts on our allies, our trust with our allies, even though they know that we all spy on one another. The fact is, when this information does come out, you've got to repair that relationship again. Add to that the battlefield information with regards to Russia and Ukraine clearly affects military decisions that are critical as to what happens with that war. And then add to that just our reputational damage and the damage to our trust. If you're going to have intelligence relationships with others, there has to be a relationship of trust, and that's been damaged.
And what guardrails do there need to be in place to make sure this doesn't happen again? And Mr. Secretary, I have to ask you, because I know you've been in various roles, Chief of Staff, CIA Director, Defense Secretary. I mean, is this the kind of situation where the President or the Chief of Staff, somebody at the White House, is maybe demanding some resignations over this?
Well, there's no question this is a giant wake-up call. Anytime this happens, whether it was Snowden, whether it was others who've revealed this kind of information, what happens is that you suddenly have to take another look, stop becoming complacent about what happens with regards to intelligence. I think there's several areas that have to be looked at. I'm glad the president directed both the Pentagon and intelligence agencies to not only investigate, but determine how we improve security. Number one, ask the question, are we classifying too much? Should we tighten up on the classification process to secret and top secret and not include all of these other areas that are part of classified information? Secondly, who should have access? And how do we secure that access? If you're going to have access, shouldn't you have somebody else in the room, particularly if you're a low-level airman? Shouldn't you have a superior officer or somebody else in the room to make sure that it's secure? Thirdly, what about clearances? Shouldn't we have a review process on clearances? We provide a clearance as was provided here, but then when somebody like this goes astray and starts getting involved in chat boxes with others, shouldn't we have the opportunity to be able to take a look at that and determine whether he should retain his clearance? And lastly, oversight of social media. This stuff was out there for almost a month before it was detected. We should be looking regularly at social media because clearly that is going to be the media where this kind of information is going to wind up going.
And what do you make of some of these leaders on the far right, like Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, defending Teixeira? I'm sure you've seen some of that out there. I mean, there are actually some folks who are defending this.
Well, you know, if you really are concerned about protecting the United States of America, what she said is just the opposite. What she's doing is basically saying we ought not to protect our most classified information, which in my mind undermines our national security. And for someone to say that, what they're essentially saying is we should not protect ourselves, because the only way we protect ourselves is with good intelligence about our adversaries so that we can make the right decisions. What she's saying is, oh no, let's not protect that information. Let's just throw it out there so our enemies and our adversaries all have access to this very sensitive information. I think it's grossly irresponsible, particularly for an elected official to take that position.
And while I have you, I'm sure you just heard a few moments ago, we have suffered another mass shooting in this country. You worked inside the White House during the Clinton administration. The Clinton administration tried to tackle this problem, passed an assault weapons ban, signed it into law. It expired during the Bush administration. What does it say about this nation's security that so many of us are afraid of mass gun violence in America?
You know, it's shocking every time these mass killings take place. It just reminds us of the dangers within our own society that we're not paying attention to. Whether it's mental problems, whether it's too many weapons that are out there, whether it's the problem of basically not overseeing the distribution of both ammunition and weapons in this country in a way that can limit, who has access to those kinds of weapons. I just think that ultimately, and I'm really glad that somebody in Tennessee recognized that you have to take some steps here. I think that's the bottom line right now, is we can't just keep excusing it. We have got to take steps. Yes, they can be small steps. I understand that. But taking any kind of steps right now would send a signal to the American people that we aren't just ignoring what is obviously a danger within our own society.
It is Monday, the 17th of April of 2023. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. How are you? Quite a weekend, eh? Well, here we are, beginning the week, and so much to happen. So much is going to happen. It always does. That's the way life is. Anyway, I was going to lead with this news story in the opening news read in the Bistro Cafe, but decided to go with another tidbit, and that is the Dominion defamation lawsuit against Fox News has been delayed by one day, and there was a bit of speculation that there may be a settlement in the offing. McFarland News did come out and say that or reports that the judge, who is the Delaware judge, when he took the stand, when he came into the courtroom to announce officially that it was to be delayed, said that there was no push for him to seek a delay, or is there... Now, this is according to McFarland News, that there is no report of a settlement, that the judge just considered this to be a normal thing. He just decided to delay it by a day. Just why not? I don't know. We used to trust our judiciary a bit. Now I don't know. Do we? Do we trust this guy? Is that really what's happening? I don't know. Fox News has a way of, shall we say, throwing a few elbows. They've done it before. They got in big-time trouble in Great Britain for what they did with that dead girl that they said was still alive, and manufactured texts or some sort of record to sort of keep her alive in the news so they could sell more papers. Well, that was a son, but still. Yeah, it's Fox. It's Murdoch. So there's that, and I'm hoping that I'm with a lot of people in social media right now that doesn't want Dominion to settle. Of course, it's not our money. We're not paying for the high-powered lawyers to make a point. So, yeah, I guess if they settle, they settle, but I hope they don't, because I want to get through all the discovery. I just want to see Fox knock down a peg or two. Now, there is a bothersome analyses that's going on in the mainstream media about how this trial could hinge on a lot of First Amendment issues, as if Fox is a legitimate news organization. So I don't know. I don't know how it is that they could be considered that when they've already in previous trials gone to court and actually said, we are not a news organization, we are an entertainment organization. And so therefore rules apply differently between those two. But now they want to say they're a news organization because I guess, if you can hide behind the First Amendment and be a propagandist to destroy America by using its own rules against it. Fascists do have a particular MO about doing exactly that. Using a country's own laws and rules and conventions against itself. And then, checkmate, just like in Independence Day. Well, you know what? Maybe we need to give them a little virus. Let it spread. Thin the herd. Is that what it was? I don't know. So, another little bit of information. This snot-nosed Air National Guardsman that Marjorie Taylor Greene says is a hero. I don't understand how she's on any oversight committee, especially if it has anything to do with intelligence or the Defense Department or even any kind of government oversight. How is it that a seditious insurgent gets to do that? Especially calling the guy's a traitor. I don't care what anybody says. Oh, he was just sharing it among his friends. What is racist, anti-Semite, Nazi, misogynist friends? just as an aside, they keep saying the kid doesn't have, I call him a kid. Okay, I shouldn't, because there's a lot of black kids who are called adults and they're only 13. This guy's, 21? Family was so patriotic. What does that mean? They watched Fox News? Yeah, anyway, once again, the mainstream media is taking this and saying, oh, yeah, he doesn't have any political ideology. He didn't, sell it to the Russians or this or that, yada, yada, yada. And yet, he was sharing it on a forum of gun nut incel. Well, there's a lot more involved there. I'll get to it in a moment. But gun nut, incel, Christo-fascist, anti-Semite, racist, with a lot of misogyny in the midst of it as well. No political ideology. Give me a break. And then it turns out that the highest promoter of that intelligence, the one who had disseminated quite a bit, turns out to be a non-commissioned officer in the Navy. What's up with that? Between the Air Force and the Navy, I don't know. Too much Fox News on the bases is what I say. Donbass Davushka, the Donbass girl, faking an identity for being a pro-Russian, and the Russian and media picked her up. She started getting a bunch of money from, I can't remember the industrialist's name, the oligarch's name. And then a bunch of other money coming in from the rubes, the useful idiots, the dupes. Now, some people are saying that she has some sort of mental issues, and that's what they always say when a white person breaks the law on a massive scale. They always say that. Oh, had some sort of mental issues. Really? Sounds treasonous to me. And she kept the money. So that makes her a good MAGA, doesn't it? You can't be a good MAGA unless you're a good grifter. They really respect that. They do. As if there's no honor among thieves. Apparently there is some sort of honor. Sometimes. So all the warnings that we issued about what was going on falls on deaf ears because we're just a bunch of stupid hippies. They always say that because we are on to their game and they know it. And we've been onto it. But apparently because we're a bunch of hippies, instead of punks, we didn't kick back enough, and now we're kicking back. All right. So, with that stated, I suppose since we have a bit of a news read for you today, and we purposely kept the opening clip a little bit shorter than we have been lately, so that we could attend to this important news that's out there in the world that sometimes just slips by the wayside, and that's why we're here. Why don't we give you a rundown on what we have in store for you, starting off in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Portland, Oregon police indiscriminately blasted tear gas toward demonstrators during the George Floyd protests in violation of their own policies. Well, they had policies not to mess around with the Proud Boys, but I guess they didn't care about that either. A Silicon Valley city councilman has been charged with perjury after he lied about leaking a grand jury report to the San Francisco 49ers last year. And a report by the National Urban League found democracy for Black Americans is under attack. Well, we need to have it codified, and the Urban League will do that. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Italian Premier Giorgia Meloni acknowledged anomalies in the handling of a Russian businessman who escaped house arrest to avoid extradition to the United States. And Europe's most powerful nuclear reactor has started regular output in Finland. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across to the left from that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, and just down a skosh is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you were able to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, that really does help us pay our bills and all the other costs that are incurred in running this powerhouse of resistance. And there have been a few of you who have done so for quite a while, and we thank you for your generosity over these many years. And we give a lot of pre-thanks to those of you who in the future may do so. And thank you very much for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders intended so many, many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. You can also follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable by going to @JusticePutnam. And I post the show notes and links diary 10 minutes before showtime. And I certainly get the show notes and links out there for the world to see, at least when I post the podcast diary. But regardless, if you follow me at Justice Putnam on those platforms, you'll be able to get to my Daily Codes diaries and get those show notes and links, which are very important to this multimedia operation that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. You can follow the show on Twitter, such as it is, at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. All right. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Travis Geddes out of Raw Story. Portland police indiscriminately blasted tear gas toward demonstrators during the George Floyd protests in violation of their own policies. The research agency Forensic Architecture, which investigates human rights violations, analyzed hundreds of videos from June 2nd of 2020, along with internal police files and other evidence, and found the Oregon City's downtown area was blanketed with tear gas in amounts more than 50 times above levels considered to be immediately dangerous to life or health, and that was reported in The Guardian. Tear gas is a form of violence that is formless and shapeless and to a certain extent invisible, said Lola Conte, an advanced researcher with Forensic Architecture. Visualizing allows us to understand the massive scale of the spread, and I hope this makes the harm unignorable and shows that something is failing on so many levels with the use of tear gas. I should remind folks, our tear gas is in violation of, well, the rules of war. Can't use it in war. The findings strongly contradict the police department's claims in internal reports at the time, when officers defended their actions as heroic and restrained, but instead show police sprayed chemicals considered to be a weapon of war towards hospitals, freeways, and other facilities before eventually reaching the nearby Willamette River. If tear gas is a war crime among soldiers, why is it appropriate to use on your own people? Said Juan Chavez, Civil Rights Project Director at the Oregon Justice Resource Center. And the Portland Police Department doesn't care about the effects of long-term, consistent exposure to tear gas. To them, it's an inventory issue. Do we have enough tear gas, and how much more can we use? A number of protesters and downtown residents who didn't even participate in the demonstrations described painful and disturbing symptoms after they were gassed. And one woman says her persistent menstrual issues and respiratory problems improved after she moved outside the city. There was a burning while I was breathing that was gone once I moved, said 42-year-old Liv Vasquez, who did not directly attend the protests. Forensic architecture reviewed internal records that suggest the Portland Police Bureau knew officers did not track how much tear gas they were spraying, or whether the levels were above OSHA thresholds for dangerous exposure. It's disturbing that this is so much higher than the standard, and yet it's completely normal for protests everywhere, said Dr. Rohani Har, an emergency medicine physician and advisor for Physicians for Human Rights. Associated Press staff brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Ash Mondays. A Silicon Valley city councilman has been charged with perjury after he lied about leaking a grand jury report to the San Francisco 49ers last year that detailed a purportedly unethical relationship between the team and the city council, prosecutors said on Friday. Santa Clara City Council member Anthony Becker is accused of providing the secret report titled Unsportsmanlike Conduct, Santa Clara City Council, to the team's former top spokesperson and a local media outlet in 2022, days ahead of its official release. Becker then lied to the grand jury about the leak, prosecutors said, prompting the criminal charges. The 49ers play in Levi Stadium in the city of Santa Clara, about 35 miles south of San Francisco. Santa Clara County is broadly considered home to Silicon Valley. The city of Santa Clara owns the stadium and leases it to the team. Fighting between the two groups has led to ethics complaints, legal disputes, and years of bad blood. Al Guido, the team's president, and Larry McNeil, the former CFO who worked extensively on the team's stadium project, were named in the indictment as witnesses who spoke to the criminal grand jury for Becker's indictment. The 49ers have cooperated fully with the DA's office in their investigation and will continue to do so, team spokesperson Brian Brokaw said in a statement on Friday. However, because this is an ongoing legal matter, the organization is not able to make any further comment at this time, and that's a pretty good boilerplate. I like that. Prosecutors say the team has bankrolled Becker's political career by spending $3.2 million through independent expenditure committees for his 2020 city council race, which he won, as well as his unsuccessful 2022 mayoral bid. The unsportsmanlike conduct report alleged that Becker and 4 other council members regularly voted in a manner that is favorable to the 49ers and would routinely meet with the team's lobbyists but not disclose what was discussed. Becker faces a felony charge of perjury under oath, as well as a misdemeanor charge of willful failure to perform duty. He is scheduled to be arraigned today. Becker did not immediately respond to requests for comment, and it was not clear whether he had an attorney who could speak on his behalf. Council member Becker violated the public's trust, Santa Clara County District Attorney Jeff Rosen said, that an elected official would commit perjury and lie under oath before the grand jury strikes at the very heart of our justice system and requires accountability. Representatives for the Santa Clara City Council did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Gary Fields of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Extreme views adopted by some local, state, and federal political leaders who try to limit what history can be taught in schools and seek to undermine how black officials perform their jobs are among the top threats to democracy for black Americans, the National Urban League says. Mark Morial, the former New Orleans mayor who leads the civil rights and urban advocacy organization, cited the most recent example: the vote this month by the Republican-controlled Tennessee House to oust 2 black representatives for violating a legislative rule. The pair had participated in a gun control protest inside the chamber after the shooting that killed 3 students and 3 staff members at a Nashville school. Both Tennessee lawmakers were quickly reinstated by leaders in their districts and were back at work in the House after an uproar that spread well beyond the state. The Urban League's annual State of Black America report, released on Saturday, draws on data and surveys from a number of organizations, including the UCLA Law School, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and the Anti-Defamation League. The collective findings reveal an increase in recent years in hate crimes and efforts to change classroom curriculums, attempts to make voting more difficult, and extremist views normalized in politics, the military, and law enforcement. One of the most prominent areas examined is so-called critical race theory. Scholars developed it as an academic framework during the 70s and 80s in response to what they viewed as a lack of racial progress following the civil rights legislation of the 60s. The theory centers on the idea that racism is systemic in the nation's institutions and that they function to maintain the dominance of white people in society. Director Tafa Alexander said the Forward Tracking Project, part of the UCLA Law School, began in response to the backlash that followed the protests of the George Floyd killing in 2020 and an executive order that year from then-President Trump restricting diversity training. The project's website shows that 209 local, state, and federal government entities have introduced more than 670 bills, resolutions, executive orders, opinion letters, statements, and other measures against critical race theory since September of 2020. Anti-critical race theory is a living organism in and of itself. It is always evolving. There are always new targets of attack, Alexander said. She said the expanded scope of some of those laws, which are having a chilling effect on teaching certain aspect of the country's racial conflicts, will lead to major gaps in understanding history and social justice. This anti-CRT campaign is going to frustrate our ability to reach our full potential as a multiracial democracy because future leaders will be missing information they could use to tackle problems, Alexander said. Well, that's a feature, not a bug, of course, in this reporter's opinion. She said one example is the rewriting of Florida elementary school material about civil rights figure Rosa Parks and her refusal to give up her seat to a white rider on a Montgomery, Alabama bus in 1955, an incident that sparked the bus boycott there. Mention of race was omitted entirely in one revision, a change first reported by the New York Times. Florida has been the epicenter of many of the steps, including opposing AP African American Studies, but it is not alone. In Alabama, a proposal to ban divisive concepts passed out of legislative committee this past week. Last year, the administration of Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin rescinded a series of policies, memos, and other resources related to diversity, equity, and inclusion that it characterized as discriminatory and divisive concepts in the state's public education system. Oklahoma public school teachers are prohibited from teaching certain concepts of race and racism under a bill by Kevin Stitt, signed into law in 2021. And on Thursday last, the Llano County Commissioner's Court in Texas held a special meeting to consider shutting down the entire public library system rather than follow a federal judge's order to return a slate of books to the shelves on topics ranging from teenage sexuality to bigotry. Other issues in the report addresses extremism in the military and law enforcement, energy and climate change, and how current attitudes can affect public policy. Predominantly white legislatures in Missouri and Mississippi have proposals that would shift certain government authority from some majority black cities to the states. In many ways, the report mirrors concerns evident in recent years in a country deeply divided over everything from how much K-12 students should be taught about racism and sexuality to the legitimacy of the 2020 election. 40% of voters in last year's election said their local K-12 public schools were not teaching enough about racism in the U.S., while 34% said it already was too much, and 23% said the current curriculum was just about right. About two-thirds of black voters said more should be taught on the subject compared with about half of Latino voters and about one-third of white voters. Violence is one of the major concerns, a concern covered in the Urban League report, especially in light of the 2022 mass shooting at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York. The shooter left a manifesto raising the Great Replacement theory as a motive in the killings. Data released by the FBI indicated that hate crimes rose between 2020 and 2021. African Americans were disproportionately represented, accounting for 30% of the incidents in which bias was known. By comparison, the second largest racial group targeted in the single incident category was white victims, which made up only 10%. All right, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, almost all net. Joining the long list of basketball movies, which date back to the silent film era, is Air, Courting a Legend. Promoted with an expensive Super Bowl ad this year, the sports drama depicts the rise of what's possibly the world's most famous shoe, the Air Jordan, and how the Nike company, which in the mid-1980s was about ready to shutter its basketball division, came to its association with superstar-to-be Michael Jordan. It's not about Jordan himself. The only evidence of him is a tall, young, mostly silent black man included in a few scenes. The characters we do get to know are those of Scout Sonny Vaccaro, Nike chairman Phil Knight, Michael's mother, Dolores, played respectively by Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, who also directs here, and Viola Davis, with strong support from some familiar faces, especially Chris Messina, whose one phone negotiation scene with Sonny is practically worth the price of admission. You'll want to write down some of the insults for the next time you quit a job or have to deal with the ex. They're all working from a sizzling script by Alex Convery, his first, unbelievably. Air was initially conceived as a Prime Video release, with the thinking that it didn't have marketability past dedicated roundball fans, but audience testing soon told the studio otherwise. Some shade has come the film's way, however, due primarily to it having the appearance of a 2-hour promotion for Nike, which it kind of is, and more generally for its approving depiction of capitalism and the uber-rich. But hey, leftist econ professors watch the Super Bowl, so you can enjoy Air guilt-free. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hey there, and welcome to Cosmos Quickly. This is Lee Billings. Today, we're talking about the curious case of Oumuamua, which became the first known interstellar visitor to our solar system when it swooped by Earth and around the Sun back in October of 2017. I'm joined by our news reporter, Megan Bartels, who just wrote a story on a fresh study about this mysterious object and talked to one of the researchers behind it. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Lee. Happy to be here.
So, Oumuamua dropped in on all of us more than 5 years ago, and it didn't really hang around. After slingshotting around the sun, it soared back on a trajectory to interstellar space. Astronomers barely got a chance to study it. It's long gone. Why are we still talking about it?
Well, Oumuamua was really weird. Astronomers weren't sure if it was an asteroid or a comet, and it was strangely shaped, long and thin like a cigar, or maybe flat and thin like a pancake. And it seemed to speed up on its outward journey in a way scientists struggled to explain.
Hold on, pump the brakes. Speed up?
Well, as it traveled away from the sun and slipped away from our star's gravitational grip, its departing velocity was faster than expected, almost like a driver of a car hitting the gas while coasting up a hill. Scientists call that non-gravitational acceleration.
Non-gravitational acceleration, got it. And that's weird because why?
It's not that weird, actually. Comets do it all the time when they come close to the sun. Sunlight warms their ice, which turns to gas and jets off the surface, a bit like a rocket.
Got it. But usually, you can see that gas or the dust trail. That's why we see comets in the sky close to the sun. And we didn't see any of that with Oumuamua, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe this explains why scientists keep offering these wacky, out-of-left-field ideas about what caused the acceleration in the first place. You know, maybe it was a big dust ball held together by electrostatic forces, a bit like a supersized version of the dust bunnies under your couch. Maybe it was a huge iceberg made of solid hydrogen. Or maybe it was a derelict alien starship. Some folks have said all these things. To be clear, all of these we've never ever seen before, as far as we know. We don't necessarily have good reasons to believe any of them exist.
Exactly. And so in the years since Oumuamua's visit, scientists have been wrestling with that puzzle. I talked with one of them, Jennifer Berkner. She's a chemist at the University of California, Berkeley. She and her colleague, Daryl Seligman, he's an astronomer at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, they think Oumuamua's odd speed up might be due to it not being so weird after all. Instead, they think it might be a small but otherwise kind of typical comet rich in water ice. They recently published their findings in the journal Nature.
I think what we were hoping to do here was to provide sort of a scenario that could explain the behavior that was seen without sort of invoking any exotic physics or chemistry.
So the idea here is that Oumuamua was made of dusty water ice, just like the comets we see in our own neighborhood all the time. Then, during its journey between star systems, cosmic rays bombarded the object and broke some of that water ice to form molecular hydrogen.
This is not like crystalline ice where it's a very compact, ordered structure. It's amorphous, so it means that it has these big sort of pores or kind of gaps within the structure of the water ice.
But that ice softened up in sunlight as Oumuamua passed by our star, and the hydrogen was able to break out, triggering that non-gravitational acceleration. Meanwhile, the ice held on to the dust that astronomers otherwise would have seen from the outgassing.
Nice and neat. Very convenient. So how convinced are scientists by this new idea?
It's really tricky to say. Some people think that the math doesn't work out. Some people still say there should have been visible signs of outgassing. And worst of all, we'll definitely never know for sure.
We have frustratingly few observations on the properties of Oumuamua. It would be difficult to prove anything for sure about Oumuamua.
But you can't keep astrochemists down.
I think certainly excited to keep an eye out for future interstellar visitors.
And we're excited too. Thank you for listening to Cosmos Quickly. Our show is produced by Jeff Delvicio, Talika Bose, and Kelso Harper. Our music was composed by Dominic Smith.
Like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And for more science news, go to scientificamerican.com.
we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Two young black men being expelled from the Tennessee House of Representatives has raised the question, for legislators, how free is their free speech? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In April, the Tennessee House of Representatives expelled Justin Pearson and Justin Jones, two young black representatives, from their elected positions because they engaged in a loud but peaceful, nonviolent, words-only protest on the floor of the State House of Representatives. The reason for their protest? 6 people, including 3 9-year-old children, had just been slaughtered in another mass shooting, this time at a private Christian school in Nashville, and the representatives at the podium protested their deaths and the lack of legislative action. In response, the overwhelmingly white legislature threw them out of the House. But the electoral process quickly returned them to their positions, and they can't be thrown out again for the same reason. Only twice before since the Civil War has the Tennessee House expelled a member, once for bribery and once for sexual misconduct. How is a protest remotely as serious as that? It's not. But legislatures are the judge and jury of the qualifications of their members to hold office. They have the power, especially when one party has a supermajority, as in Tennessee, when there is an alleged breach of the rules, to decide what to do. Which brings us to Lord Acton's famous quote, "Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was a day of tragedy for workers in the gold fields of Serbia. Gold miners by the Lena River in southeast Serbia worked under brutal conditions. The Lena Gold Mining Joint Stock Company ran the mining operation. The lucrative gold mines lined the pockets of shareholders, including Russian aristocrats and British industrialists. But the workers saw very little of the bounty they mined. They toiled for 16 hours a day for low wages. To make matters worse, workers were often paid in coupons they could cash in for food at the company store. The quality of the food was poor. A staggering 700 accidents occurred for every 1,000 workers in the mines. At the end of February, when one group of workers was given rancid meat, they had finally had enough. The workers walked out on strike. Soon they were joined by thousands of their comrades. They formed a strike committee and demanded an 8-hour day, 30% wage increase, better food, and improved workplace conditions. At first, the company agreed to talk to the workers, but negotiations went nowhere. Troops were called in and arrested the entire strike committee. Workers rallied to demand the release of their leaders. A crowd of 2,500 striking workers gathered. The troops fired into the unarmed crowd, wounding an estimated 500 workers and killing more than 250. As outraged workers across the country learned of the massacre, a wave of workers' strikes and protests swept throughout Russia. On May Day, 300,000 workers marched in the streets for the 8-hour day. The gold miners continued their strike throughout the summer, but to no avail. Thousands eventually left the gold fields to find less brutal work elsewhere.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 36 degrees Fahrenheit, partly cloudy, with showers developing this morning and becoming a steady rain throughout the day. Thunder is possible. Highs will be in the low 50s. Winds out of the southwest at 10 to 20 miles per hour. And it looks like we're going to get between a quarter to a third of an inch of rain. And then cloudy with rain and snow showers this evening. A few breaks in the clouds overnight, lows in the low 30s, winds out of the southwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour, and then a mix of clouds and sun early, then increasing clouds later in the day with more rain developing overnight tomorrow, winds out of the southwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour, and we'll have highs in the low 50s. Grass pollen is rated low here in the little town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 42 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is moderate at level 4. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.94 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that's why it's called the Weather Underground. London is 61 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 52 degrees and cloudy. Rome is 67 and sunny with an advisory for wind disruption. Kyiv is 58 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 53 degrees with light rain. Hong Kong is 78 and fair. Tokyo is 53 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 60 degrees and fair. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York, New York is 56 degrees Fahrenheit, fog, and a small craft advisory has been issued. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. And the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. Italian Premier Giorgia Meloni acknowledged anomalies in the handling of a Russian businessman who escaped from house arrest in Italy to avoid extradition to the United States. And she said Saturday that she would speak with the Justice Minister to understand what happened. During a visit to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Meloni termed the case of Artyom Us grave and vowed to get to the bottom of it when she returned to Rome. Us, the 40-year-old son of a Russian regional governor, was detained in October of 2022 at Milan Malpensa Airport on a U.S. warrant accusing him of violating sanctions. In November, a ruling from a Milan appeals court resulted in him being moved from jail to house arrest and outfitted with an electronic monitoring bracelet. He escaped from Italy on March 22nd, a day after a Milan court recognized as legitimate the U.S. extradition request, and surfaced in Russia earlier this month. For sure there are anomalies, Melania told reporters in Ethiopia. The principal anomaly, I'm sorry to say, is the decision of the appeals court to offer him house arrest with a frankly debatable motivation and to then maintain that decision even after there was an extradition request, because obviously in that case, the flight risk becomes more obvious. She welcomed the decision by Italian Justice Minister Carlo Nodio to undertake a disciplinary investigation, saying, "We have to have clarity." But she also said Italy did not have detailed intel info from the U.S. Justice Department about the nature of the person. Italian newspaper La Repubblica reported on Saturday that U.S. authorities made clear that the Russian presented a very high flight risk in two notes to Nordio's office, one from October 19th, 2 days after Us's arrest, and the other sent after he was granted house arrest on November 25th. The U.S. asked for Us to remain jailed pending the outcome of a extradition proceeding and cited 6 cases in the past years in which suspects escaped from house arrest in Italy while extradition requests were pending. The newspaper said Nordio assured the U.S. in a December 6 note that the electronic monitoring bracelet put on Us and his required periodic check-ins with police were sufficient. Repubblica cited the Milan court's reply to Nordio's investigation as saying the justice minister had the authority at any time to impose tougher restrictive measures on someone in extradition proceedings.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jerry Tanner of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Finland's much-delayed and costly new nuclear reactor, Europe's most powerful by production capacity, has completed a test phase lasting more than a year and started regular output, boosting the Nordic country's electricity self-sufficiency significantly. The Olkiluoto 3 reactor, which has a 1,600 megawatt capacity, was connected into the Finnish national power grid in March of 2022 and kicked off regular production yesterday, Sunday. The operator, known as TVO, tweeted out that Olkiluoto 3 is now ready after a delay of 14 years from the original plan. It will help Finland to achieve its carbon neutrality targets and increase energy security at a time when European countries have cut oil, gas, and other power supplies from Russia, Finland's neighbor. The production of the Olkiluoto 3 stabilizes the price of electricity and plays an important role in the Finnish green transition, TVO president and CEO Jarmo Tanua said in a statement. The company added that the electricity production volume of Europe's largest nuclear power plant unit is a significant addition to clean domestic production. Except for those spent fuel rods they have to bury for thousands of years. Oh well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.